he believes that the galactic logos will send its 7 rays through the sun god and change our DNA into a better evolution. Despite these flimsy premises, Icke is absolutely convinced that nothing can stop this from happening.
I'm absolutely convinced that the end of this prison society is a done deal. I think the outcome is going to happen. I think it's meant to happen. And we're now seeing, and it will go on for a while, but we're now seeing the last throes of a dying system.
You also have to understand that we are being promised a utopia in no uncertain terms. He says, quote, "Beyond the turmoil of transformation awaits a new dawn for all life forms on this planet. We will live in a world of love and peace and harmony, a world which the extremes of today and the recent past will give way to a level of understanding, wisdom, love that we could not begin to understand on this low and troubled frequency." The first problem that emerges is that this is sounding a lot like what those that write about a new world order talk about. In fact, this chapter comes from a chapter entitled New World in Icke's Love Changes Everything. But what some people miss is that the New World Order really does plan to bring order out of chaos. It is supposed to rise out of the ashes of what will appear to be a great change in paradigm. That is why Manly P. Hall called it the New Atlantis. They intend for their system to look like a utopia, and they intend for people who currently fight them and resist world government to think that the old system that they have been fighting has been defeated, and they intend for them to embrace what will look like a utopia and their victory. Alice Bailey said it best when she wrote, "The New World Order must be appropriate to a world which has passed through a destructive crisis and to humanity which is badly shattered by the experience. The New World Order must lay the foundation for a future world order which will be possible only after a time of recovery, reconstruction, and of rebuilding." Notice in this next quote that she considers the current system, which is obviously still controlled by them, just the preparatory New World Order. She says, "In the preparatory period for the New World Order, there will be a steady and regulated disarmament. It will not be optional. No nation will be permitted to produce and organize any equipment for destructive purposes or to infringe the security of any other nation." She also says, "The present world order, which is today largely disorder, can be so modified and changed that a new world and a new race of men can gradually come into being. Renunciation and the use of the sacrificial will should be the keynote for the interim period after the war, prior to the inauguration of the new age." In a writing called Preparations Until 2025, she made some very revealing statements. She says, "This must form the theme of all propaganda work to be done during the next few decades until the year 2025, a brief space of time indeed to produce fundamental changes in human thought, awareness, and direction, but at the same time, a quite possible achievement provided the new group of world servers and the men and women of goodwill perform a conscientious task." What was this new group supposed to teach? I find this one particularly interesting. It says, "The day is dawning when all religions will be regarded as emanating from one great spiritual source. All will be seen as unitedly providing the one root out of which the universal world religion will inevitably emerge." And this final quote that I find particularly interesting, considering that it is the one thing that Icke has consistently done through every manifestation. The last few pages of every book that he has ever written explains this message, the one that Alice Bailey says emphasis must be put on. She says, quote, "Emphasis should be laid on the evolution of humanity." There is also a very dark side to Icke's spiritual utopia, something that I've previously only alluded to. Not everyone is invited to the utopia, and those that refuse to conform to this new system will be eliminated. This is much more apparent when you read other channeled writings about this. In the book of Co-Creation, New Age leader Barbara Marx Hubbard states, quote, "Out of the full spectrum of human personality, 1/4 is electing to transcend. 1/4 is resisting to election. They are unattracted by life ever evolving. Now, as we approach the quantum shift from creature human to co-creative human, the destructive 1/4 must be eliminated from the social body. Fortunately, you, dearly beloveds, are not responsible for this act. We are. We are in charge of God's selection process for the planet Earth. He selects, we destroy. We are the riders of the pale horse death. Alice Bailey explained what the New World Order would do to those who refuse to accept its utopia. She says, "Let us never forget that it is the life, its purpose, and its directed, intentional destiny that's of importance, and also that when a form proves inadequate, or too diseased or too crippled for the expression of that purpose, it is, from the point of view of the hierarchy, no disaster when that form has to go. Death is not a disaster to be feared. The work of the destroyer is not really cruel or undesirable. Therefore, there is much destruction permitted by the custodians of the plan, and much evil turned to good." In his chapter New World, Icke says, "I do not seek to hide the severity of this period of fundamental change. It will be tough for every one of us. Many will return to the light levels, or die, in the wake of the physical events and the quickening vibrations. The Earth Spirit is already raising up the subplanes, and through the years ahead she will progress through the whole frequencies in her journey back to Atlantis and beyond. Those who cannot quicken their own vibrations through love and balance will find themselves out of synchronization with the environment around them. This process is already apparent. As the vibrations of a being fall behind those of their planet, it manifests in physical, mental, and emotional imbalances, and such people will need all the love there is to give. Their behavior will be unpredictable, and sometimes unpleasant and inexplicable. Those who cannot at this time rise with the climbing subplanes and frequencies will eventually return to the light levels, or die, and be surrounded by love and indescribable warmth and power. They will assess their progress and decide how they wish to proceed on their path of evolution." Icke also says later in the book, "And the Truth Shall Set You Free," quote, "Others who follow the propaganda of the global elite and the prison warder consciousness will cling to the old vibration. In their desperation to find security, they will become even more vehement in their religious, political, and economic dogma. They will resist the rising vibrations if they choose that path, and this will have mental, emotional, and physical effects. The two states of being, the programmed mind and the open mind, will be more obvious with every month to those who know what's happening." And not just that, but according to Icke, these people that are hanging on to the old age are going to actually prevent the rest of the people from getting their evolution. He says, quote, "We are now entering a period of fantastic change, and the happening of events are speeding up all the time. We have two challenges here in front of us. People have to get access to that information and start to realize who they really are and the nature of life. Then we can go into a stage 2, which is the incredible consciousness shift that is going to happen and is happening with many people already, but can happen for everybody if we open up to the knowledge of what's going on. And to do that, the edifice of suppression must go. What I see so often in the New Age movement is that they are focusing on the second, but they're in denial of the first. And the second is not going to happen for many people unless we remove the suppression." Now here's a thought that has disturbed me for a while now. Obviously, the idea of spiritual evolution is being pushed by the global elite and these entities. And I suppose that it could lead to a world government, but only if the entire world was in on it. What I mean is that right now, only the New Age and the so-called truth movement, which has now been converted to the New Age, believe the spiritual evolution stuff. And sure, the idea is expanding, thanks to shock value things like the 2012 stuff, but still, it would have to be believed by the entire world, not just a few. They would have to be passionate about the idea of spiritual evolution for this to work. Now, let Mr. Icke explain how this could all change overnight.
What I would say very strongly, and it's coming more and more into my life, there is an X factor which I don't understand yet, but I sure as hell know is there. And it's an X factor which is going to bring an end to this childish playground nonsense of human control.
Do you mean an external influence?
There's something. I absolutely, at a deep level, I know it. I'd say, and I'm probably being optimistic, I'd say we would live in a global version of Nazi Germany within 10 years, if we take that route. Mm-hmm. If we take that route, we'll, in 10 years' time, be deeply into a transition to a very different world. It's just a choice. But this X factor is going to help us to change the world to one that I would like to live in. Don't know what the X factor is, but I know it's coming.
No one's going to do it for us, right?
Well, my feeling is that there's an X factor. I don't think myself that humanity can do it alone, because the program is so deep and the pressure to go the other way, to hold on to the hack, is so powerful to people who are in mind alone, that I think what we can do is change enough so that we stop adding to the problem. But I think there's an X factor, I think. And I think that there are things going on now outside of our awareness and on much higher levels of consciousness than we're aware of, which is also supporting this change.
Notice what the function of the X factor is. He says that the programming to hold us all into the old ways is too strong. But the X factor, this external thing, will shatter that paradigm and set us free from our old way of thinking, and it will give us a new paradigm. Let me suggest a possible X factor that people like Bill Cooper have suggested, and one that I think, without question, we are being prepared for by the global elite, and have been for at least 70 years. That is, an extraterrestrial presence being discovered. I realize that Cooper presented documents that reveal a plan of the New World Order to use an alien threat to cause patriotism needed for world government. After all, people would no longer view themselves as separate countries, but instead a world family. Now, this would also create the need for a world bureaucracy to deal with the threat. But I think that based on the propaganda of Hollywood and the occult writings, that this might not be presented as a threat at all, but rather them posing as a savior to a world that will be war-torn. They will claim to be saving us from ourselves. They will claim to have genetically created mankind. They would claim that they used to be like us, and that we are on the verge of an evolution. Now, suspend your disbelief for a moment as I explain how this would serve as Icke's X factor and the catalyst for his utopia, and the real New World Order to begin, all at the same time. First, it would accomplish the primary thing that Icke says we need to do in order to shift with the planet. That is, to destroy the religions of all types. All over the world, religions would be in turmoil. Here these aliens are claiming to have created us. That means they're claiming to be our God in a sense. Overnight, the programming that Icke says is too powerful, the religious programming that is holding us back from the shift, would be shattered. All the religions would be forced to reconsider their ideas. Secondly, it would finally get the idea of a possible spiritual evolution to the entire world. Everyone across the world, from the smallest village to the largest city, would have a really good reason to believe that they too could be evolved. They could become like the aliens. They could become actual gods. Overnight, the X factor could turn the entire world into little David Ickes, believing their evolution was just around the corner. And of course, people would believe that the world government utopia was possible then. But it would be best if this came after a time of war, like when Alice Bailey said that the New World Order must be appropriate to a world which has passed through a destructive crisis and to a humanity which is badly shattered by the experience. Now here's why. We need to be convinced that the utopia that we will be asked to join is totally different than the old system. For us truther types, we will need to be convinced that the New World Order has been defeated in order to trust such a utopia. The regular people will only have to be convinced that the new system, since it will be based on non-religious ideas now, because the aliens showed us that the religions were wrong, will be one where there will be no more wars. That will be the promise. The war that we were saved from initially by them must be made to look like the epitome of religious wars. It will be something that pins the Jews against the Muslims, which will draw in the so-called Christians. The world will be convinced that the previous war was all about religion. Our revulsion of that idea and our desire never to go back to it will be like the Treaty of Versailles times 100. Alice Bailey said, "Only universal disaster could have brought men to a state of mind wherein such propositions and solutions could be presented. The general recognition that the old order has lamentably failed is most valuable. The New World Order will seem to have been defeated. We will rejoice in our new hope of utopia, and we will badly need it.